you can see, it's another really long one, so I invite you to be seated. And we're actually going to do this as a reader's theater, so you'll hear it from several different parts around the church.
As Jesus walked along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered,
"Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind, so that God's works might be revealed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world."
When he had said this, he spat on the ground and made mud with saliva and spread the mud on the man's eyes, saying to him,
"Go, wash in the pool of Siloam."
Then he went and washed and came back able to see. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" Some were saying, "It is he." Others were saying, "No, but it is someone like him." He kept saying,
I am the man.
but they kept asking him, "Then how are your eyes opened?" He answered,
The man called Jesus made mud. He spread it on my eyes and said to me, "Go to Siloam and wash." Then I went and washed and received my sight.
They said to him, "Where is he?" He said,
I don't know.
They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. Then the Pharisees also began to ask him how he had received his sight. And he said to them,
He put mud on my eyes, then I washed, and now I see.
Some of the Pharisees said,
"This man is not from God, for he does not observe the Sabbath."
but others said,
How can a man who is a sinner perform such signs?
and they were divided. So they said again to the blind man,
What do you say about him? It was your eyes he opened.
He said,
He is a prophet.
The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them,
Is this your son, who you say was born blind? How then does he now see?
His parents answered, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind, but we do not know how it is that he now sees, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself." His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that anyone who confessed Jesus to be the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, "He is of age. Ask him." So for the second time they called the man who had been blind, and they said to him,
Give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner.
He answered,
I do not know whether he is a sinner. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see.
They said to him,
What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?
He answered them,
I have told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples?
Then they reviled him, saying,
You are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from.
The man answered,
Well, here is an astonishing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but he does listen to those who worship him and obeys his will. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing.
They answered him,
You were born entirely in sins, and are you trying to teach us?
and they drove him out. Jesus heard that they had driven him out, and when he found him, he said,
"Do you believe in the Son of Man?"
He answered,
And who is he, sir? Tell me so that I may believe in him.
Jesus said to him,
"You have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he."
He said,
Lord, I believe.
and he worshipped him. Jesus said,
"I came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see may see, and those who do see may become blind."
Some of the Pharisees near him heard this and said to him,
"Surely we are not blind, are we?"
Jesus said to them,
"If you were blind, you would not have sinned. But now that you say, we see, your sin remains.
Jesus said in that story, I am the light of the world. As the light of the world, the one who came to shine on all of our shadowy places, Jesus had one simple mission statement as he came to be with us. And we can find that mission statement in Luke. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. A very simple mission statement, if you would say. Let's say that together. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. Jesus, the light of the world, came to seek and save the lost. Today, in today's message, he came to seek and save the blind man. The blind man and so many more than just the blind man, and not just for that day, but Jesus continued through his ministry to seek out and save the lost, and he continues to seek out and save the lost even to today. And when it comes to the blind man, we have to ask, as did those who were around him in the lesson that we just heard, why was the man born blind? Was it his parents that sinned or him that sinned? Because in that day, you can find places in what we call the Old Testament in their time that was just the scriptures, that it talks about the sins of the parents are passed on to the kids to 3 generations. In other places it's to 1,000 generations. And so they wanted to know, was it his parents that sinned to cause him to be blind, or was it he himself that did something, who knows, in the womb or whatever? It says he was born blind. But Jesus said, no. He was simply born blind. Period. End of deal. He was born blind. It happens sometimes. So what did the blind man do to deserve to be blind? Nothing. The other question we ask is, what did he do to deserve to be healed, to be given his sight? And the same answer is nothing. He was there, and Jesus happened to be there, and he placed his hands on his eyes, and he could see. He says, one thing I do know, though I was blind, now I see. As I was thinking about this text this week, I kept thinking over and over again about not being physically blind, but being challenged in ways that most of us can't imagine. And I've been thinking of my brother David. You met him a couple of weeks ago. If you hadn't met him before, he was our preacher a couple of weeks ago. And for me, he's one of my heroes in life. Because when he was young, in grade school, I don't know what grade it was, he was 2 or 3 years behind me, but I know he came home from school one day crying because the teacher had called him stupid. Can you imagine a teacher calling a kid stupid? Apparently he was given a math question to work out on the board, and he simply stood there and looked at it and couldn't figure it out, and it must have been a relatively simple math question. And the teacher said, do you just not listen, or are you just stupid? And this was in the 60s, and it was before we knew that when David looked at a number like this, it could very well be that number as well, and that they might switch in the middle of looking at the board. David had pretty bad dyslexia, but at that time they didn't really know what that was. David was simply slow of learning. He was a slow learner, or some of them called him, some of the adults, the teachers called him retarded. Numbers were terrible. He still hates numbers. But letters, some of the letters were even worse. Can you imagine this letter? I'm a little bit dyslexic, so if you put that letter up there, I have a 50-50 chance of getting that right. It could be that one or that one. David has a 1 in 4 chance, because it could be these other two as well. Numbers and letters for him just swim all over the place. And in so many ways, he is blind when it comes to reading and writing and arithmetic and some of those things that get us through life. And yet my brother David, with the help of my mother, struggled all the way through grade school, and she helped him so much with his homework. And once in a while, my older brother and I would help him when we had the patience to help him with that. Because we didn't really understand it either. But Mom knew he wasn't stupid. And she helped him through grade school. She helped him through high school. She helped him get started in college. Then he met this wonderful woman named Constance that helped him see his way through college to get his college degree. And she helped him see his way all the way through seminary to get a master's degree. Now, does that sound like somebody that a teacher would call stupid? David is far from stupid, and he is far from blind. But in many ways, he's still blind. You wouldn't catch him, and thank God Constance does the bookkeeping and things in their house, because if David had to do the math to keep the checkbook right, it would never happen. And he doesn't like to read and things, so in some ways he's still blind. And people are blind to how this condition changes his life. And there has not been for him a time where he has been able to say, well, I was blind and now I can see, because he still is challenged by all of these things. And yet he has overcome them in so many ways. And you can see maybe a little bit after you heard him speak a couple of weeks ago and got to meet him, why he's a hero to me. Because he's put up with this blindness, we might say. But Jesus came into the world, and today he says, I am the light of the world. He was the light of the world for David, because certainly in David's life, God put my mother and Constance in his life so that he could blossom and be the person that he was meant to be able to see the light that Jesus shares with us, the light that Jesus is, so that he could do this incredible work that he does, sharing God's light. So I imagine if David had been born blind, he still would have been able to somehow get through all the things that he got through, and would still be a chaplain to those who are dying like he is now. Can you imagine doing that kind of work day after day after day, being a hospice chaplain? Just the amount of grace and mercy and the empathy you have to do that is phenomenal. And that comes from this person that came and said, I am the light of the world, the one that comes and shines in the dark places, whether we created them or whether they just are. Jesus comes and shines in those dark places. And he said, the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. So who are the lost? Who are the blind for us today? Well, first, it's us. We are the ones that need to hold the mirror up for ourselves and say, where is it that I am blind? And where is it that I can say in the words of Amazing Grace, I was lost, but now am found. I was blind, and now I see. Who are the blind today? Who are the lost? We can look in our own neighborhood and see that we could say, we've gone through this exercise before. We say it's the homeless, it's the drug addicts, it's a list of those, but I would add to that list today. Who are those that we might be blind to? The homebound, the mentally ill, those who don't know yet about God's grace. Those are the ones that need to know this light of the world, the one who came to seek out and save the lost. Those that we need to reach out and touch. At the end of the gospel lesson, Jesus had heard that they had driven the blind man out. So for the second time in his life, or for the second time in his life, he was an outcast when he was blind, and now all of a sudden he can see, and he can be like them, and he can be productive, and he can do all the things that he couldn't do before. And what do? They drive him out once again. So he's an outcast. He should be on the inside, and yet they drive him out again. But Jesus goes to search for him. In the same way that he goes to search for you and I, especially when we are blind. When he found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" And the man who was blind but now sees says, "And who is he, sir?" Like he doesn't even recognize Jesus all of a sudden. "Tell me so that I may believe in him." Well, you have seen him, and the one speaking to you is he. How often do we hear in the Gospels Jesus being displained about who he is? He came and he said, "I am the light of the world." And now he's saying, "I am the Son of Man." And the blind man said, "Lord, I believe." And he worshiped him. Jesus went out and found him. He sought him out so that he could save him. The same as he seeks us out to save us so that we can be God's hands. To go to those to whom we are blind to those who are blind, especially to the grace of God, and to those that need our special kind of care. So may we look in a mirror and be able to say, "Yes, Lord, I was blind, but now I see." Amen. Let's stand and sing together.